do today is kind of go over how you go back to use your calculator again. Like I said, test on Thursday will be calculator, non-calculator. You have to be able to know when to use all. You'll have one sheet that's all non-calculator. You'll hand that in, and then you can use your calculator, or vice versa. What's going to happen here is you've all done this next stuff before. This is not going to be new. You've done this before. Correct. You have to use the inverse of cosine to solve for this, but that means you have to make sure that your calculator is in what mode? Remember, go back to mode on your calculator. Make sure you have degree highlighted. Okay? Make sure you are in degree, and go from there. Again, if you're going to solve out and you have to use cosine, what'd you guys get? There we go.
I don't know. I think you gave this back to me.
So you've done this before. This isn't going to be anything new. This is all straightforward. But what's going to change a little bit is how some of the scenarios work out. Before we have to press buttons here, what trig function are you going to use?
Sine inverse.
Sine inverse. Good. What trig function are you going to use? Sine inverse. Now let's do the fun stuff. We use inverse stuff to use some very simple trig equations. Again, what this is going to look like is we want to find the sine, what theta has the sine of -1/4. How do I solve for theta? You inverse sine, okay? So theta, inverse sine of -1/4. What do you get? What's your angle? -14.48, good. Now here's what I want you to see what's going on. When you're finding your inverse sine functions, remember, it's quadrant 1, quadrant 4 that it's working with. This negative angle of -14.48 is this part right here. It's the reference angle. You agree?
Yeah.
That's the reference angle for it. Now, it's asking you to figure out what angle has the sine of -1/4 that's in which quadrant, though.
Quadrant 3.
How do I get this reference angle bounced to the third quadrant? Yes, sir.
180
Very good. In order to get the reference angle in the third quadrant that has that same reference angle, it's 180 plus the 1448. That gives you your angle. What we're working on today, guys, is we're going to solve these very simplistic sine, cosine, tangent, inverse function equations, and then use reference angles to bounce them into the other quadrants. And it's going to tell you which quadrant to bounce into. Here it's telling you to go to Q3 because sine is negative there. So that's what we're looking at. Not so bad, is it? Remember, when you're bouncing around off your quadrants, you're always working off the x-axis. Get it? Great question.
I was going to say why you put it in the bottom language, and I remember that it's negative, so that's
Yeah. And just to review that, a lot of people forgot this earlier today. When you're talking about your ordered pairs, remember your ordered pairs here are cosine, sine. Yes, sir.
Do you ever like look at those ordered pairs and just see like a head and a face? You know what I'm saying? Like the signs are the eyes, in the parentheses are the head, and the commas the nose.
No.
All right.
clown face. That's right, Michael. I've been on that drug.
But no, it's got to be smaller. It's got to be like in proportion to the sign. There you go. Yep, perfect.
But isn't he dead?
Yes.
Not a clown.
Yeah, they get
Yeah,
the
but
blood.
then the guy in the quadrant 3 is sleeping.
That's like
Or he's really mad.
Yeah.
Looks like Squid.
You never thought of it this way?
No, the other two have lazy eyes.
But then again, talking to the guy who does Billy Binomial. I told you guys Billy Binomial. Billy's dead. So remember, when you're walking through these things, if sine and cosine are both positive, what's tangent going to be? Positive. If one of the sine or cosine is negative, tangent will be negative. And if they're both negative, tangent is
Positive.
so this is kind of where a lot of people tend to forget how this is all built off of that. Remember, use the same idea of working with your ordered pairs as you would numerically, and just treat them as cosine and sine, and you're going to be all right. Yes, sir.
I do have another question. Those 4 problems we did last Friday,
Yeah.
are they graded?
Yeah,
They're in the grade book?
yeah, yeah. I'd like to talk about those later, maybe if we have time.
What's the extra credit?
Yes, sir.
When are you naming the quizzes for one?
Tomorrow. Tomorrow, because there's 3 people in here that have to do them. So.
It's gravy bacon.
All right. So let's try some more of these. Again, what I want you to do is I want you to solve these, remembering about how you work with the reference angles. Use your reference angles to bounce them into the quadrant they're asking you to place it. Whether you have to add the 360, subtract the add the 180, subtract the 180, subtract the 360, working yourself around. Go on and try those out. Make sure you're in degree mode. This is all degree mode stuff, okay? I know, sorry. Yeah, I should have told you. Sorry about that. All right, type in the calculator yourself. Do you know what the angle is? What button do you press?
Yeah, the third.
Right, you have to use the inverse. Whenever you're trying to find the angle, always use the inverse.
I got it. Where'd you get?
So it would be 200.
Don't start
Do you edit to 180?
No.
Because it would be like.
Oh, yeah, stop. I said stop. I said stop.
It has the same
Yeah, I thought 0. Talking about Batman.
But I added it, you see what
Watch this. Your negative sign is down just the same.
So you add the 180 and then there's.
Yeah, you add the positive things. I got 67, so now you add.
Yes.
Yeah, weird. How you gonna bounce it off? Shut up. What are you gonna do? Bring it down. But not until you're adding 118. Right? Positive. Negative. So what you have now is you got that in the 4th quadrant, you got the negative back. You brought that to the 1st quadrant, it's the same value positive. So in the 3rd quadrant, that's the same value you just added. So what you want to do is you move that to the 1st quadrant.
We can always just insert it.
That's like, well, what if you could add it?
I know, but no one's signing up.
It was
Why is it red?
weighted in, and then Demonte was like, why didn't you stop these?
All right, let's take a look at the sine one.
He said, I don't dunk on Sundays. What?
It's disrespectful.
Again, when you're working with the sine, it was inverse sine of negative 0.35. Negative 20.49. Everybody agree?
Yes.
All right, 20.49. Now remember, when you're dealing with the inverse sine function, you're looking at first or fourth quadrant. So here's your negative 20.49 degree angle. Which means if I want to be in the third quadrant, sine is still negative, which is what we're looking for. And in order to move off the x-axis, how far off of that do I have to move it? Okay, what's 20.49 plus 180? There you go. Sweet.
Kill him.
Remember, you're... Huh?
Why did you get that number if you added it? That means
Sounds like that, that sounds like that home improvement
Always.
thing.
Think about what you're doing here. Think about how we always worked with the negative angle. Its reference angle in the first quadrant was the same thing, positive. Remember that? So if I take this and I want to be here, aren't I just adding 180 degrees to that to spin it over here?
Yes. When you subtract 180, you get the number that you have before. When you add 180, you get a number that's not.
Yeah, because you added the negative. What you did there is you found it in the second quadrant. Tangent. Inverse tangent of 2.4. 6738. First quadrant. Again, I want to be in the third quadrant. Since that's already in the first quadrant, that is the reference angle. How far off is it from the x-axis? It's 67 and change. So in order to be down here, it has to move off of that as well, so I just add 180 to it. $247.38. Okay. Remember, tangent's positive in the third quadrant because they're both, sine and cosine are both negative. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Remember, you can always check your answers on these because if I take the sine of 200.49, negative 0.35, you can always check your answers. Tangents of 247.38. 2.399984. We're okay.
Yeah.
Remember, right. What I'm doing here is I'm checking my solutions. All right. Try it again. Is it?
Mr. How's baseball?
She's like, if it's really cold out, I don't want to know. She's like, I don't know how we do it, but they haven't done it.
About what?
Like, we need that on.
Oh.
Like 36, 36.
Aren't they having it in the comments? Don't they have it in the comments?
Like the first one, you got like.
Inverse cosine of 0.43. 6453. Okay. 6453 gets us to the first quadrant. I want to be in which quadrant? Fourth quadrant. So 64, well, it's supposed to be 53, excuse me. That's the reference angle, correct?
Yeah.
Now, how do I figure out what theta is to make sure it's between 270 and 360? What do I have to do?
Subtract by 360.
Not subtract, subtract from.
That's
Yeah.
what I meant.
What'd you get then?
295.
What they said.
No, it's going to move yourself off. Always bounce off the x-axis. Think about it here. If this was 20 degrees, and you add 270, to that, you'd be at 290, right? Not at 340. See what I'm saying? There's only one angle that works for it. 45. Wait, no, that doesn't work. Yes, it will.
Yeah,
So like 45. You're still halfway. Otherwise, always base off of the x-axis. You always want to base off of the x-axis. Inverse sine of 0.8. What'd you get? Wait, how many different answers are there out there?
All of them. 53.
5313, okay? Again, if that's the reference angle, that's coming out of the first quadrant. That's coming out of the first quadrant. Isn't that its own reference angle?
Yeah.
Okay. If that's its own reference angle, how do you bounce that to the second quadrant? 180 minus that, and what'd you get?
126.
126.87? Okay. Now, the stuff that's going to be the weirdest is, let me show you the number here. You know, for everybody except for you.
Really? I enjoy that. Great.
Try this one real quick. I want to see it. Yes, sir.
Is there ever going to be a night where we don't have homework in this class?
There are. There's been many nights you don't have homework.
Besides tests.
Maybe.
It's like a random.
Hey, Mr. Rivera, are we doing any like projects like
We might.
mechanical projects?
We might. Take a look at this one. This is a kind of a weird scenario when you have to worry about an obtuse angle out of a cosine. When you inverse this, what'd you get for theta? 136.25 days?
Yeah.
Oh, five.
0.05.
Okay.
So,
So remember, cosine can go between 0 and 180 degrees going through the first two quadrants. Now, if the theta is 136.05, what's its reference angle? All right, 43.95 is the reference angle. And then how do you bounce that to the third quadrant? Add 180 to it. Good. So you guys know how to do that. That's about as goofy as some of this stuff gets, because in cosine you do wind up with that obtuse angle. When you have the obtuse angle, you have to do a little bit more work to find its reference angle to bounce around. Does it what? Reference angle is how far is it bounced off the x-axis.
How'd you find it?
In that case, see how it's placed in the second quadrant? Whenever your angle, your theta is placed in the second quadrant, your reference angle is going to be 180 minus theta. If it's third quadrant, it's theta minus 180. Fourth quadrant, 360 minus theta.
Couldn't you just say X?
No,
That doesn't make it
Theta.
cool.
it is cooler.
Okay.
Right? They're a bunch of babies. That's a lot. Here's what I want you to do. 296.
is this homework?
I want you to start at 44, go to 56. On 796. 796, 44 to 56.
Wait, 796?
Yes, sir.
That's 12.
Okay. 44 to 56. You have some time now. You should not be able to, or you should be able to get just about all of it done before you get out of here. Yeah. Hurry up.
What page is this?